Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Claris 2025 Claris FileMaker 2025 launch party. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome Robert Holsey and Clay Maeckel to share the changes that have come to Claris Studio and FileMaker and the tighter integration of all of the components of the Claris platform. So, Robert, if you want to just take a moment and introduce yourself while I start the poll.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Robert Holsey. I'm one of the product managers here at Claris. Coming up on actually 21 years since I started first working in support. So my career here is almost old enough to drink here in the States, which is fun. I've worked on almost all the platform, almost all aspects of the platform at this point, but at this point, most focused on Claris Studio. I don't know that Clay needs an introduction, but go for it anyway, Clay.
Hi. Well, I guess I'm old enough to retire, I guess, not much left to drink, but yeah, no, I started at Apple in 1986 and mainly started working on FileMaker in around the mid 90s. So I'm currently the FileMaker software architect, or one of the two. I'm Wade Chu is the other one. We have two of us that really look at that. And recently I've been doing like OData additions. I've been interacting with other teams to get all these new features coming out.
Great. Well, thank you. And as Angie mentioned in the chat, please, if you have questions, just drop them in chat and be sure to make sure you change your chat to everyone. And then also, please answer the questions in the poll. And today, Robert would like to know if you're using Claris Studio, if you're more likely to use it now that you have a more seamless connection to bring FileMaker data over to Claris Studio, and also to find out if you had used Studio previously, if you brought Claris Studio tables into your FileMaker apps. And while all of you complete the poll, I'll let Robert take it away with a quick demo of what's now possible.
Sure, thanks, Rosemary. So I wanted to walk through a full end-to-end. Some of you may have seen elements of this. If you joined us at Engage, you saw a version of this demo. It's a little bit more involved now, where I can show fully everything as we build it in real time. I do like to live dangerously, though, so this is a live demo, one that I just re-uploaded the file moments before this demo because I had foolishly made some changes to it over the weekend that forced me to download and re-upload it. So understand that, again, live demo, so all pray with me for the demo gods to be with us. But what we're seeing here is a FileMaker solution hosted on FileMaker Server 2025. This solution has just shy of 10,000 records in it currently, but otherwise it's in a super complex file. And then if I open up Claris Studio here, you can see this is a pretty new org. I've only done a couple of pre-configurations to save us time. One was that I've configured a external identity provider. This will allow us to see what the end user experience will be towards the end of the demo. And then I've added a new data source here called PeakWorks. This was just so that I could save you watching me type in the data source and username and password. But that's the only configuration I've done. You can see here when I select the data source, I will get access to all of the FileMaker files and their tables on that server for the username and password I provided. So to be super clear there, what we're looking at is any account in a file that has the OData extended privilege enabled. That file and its tables will show up here. The particular table that I'd like to add in this case is called job, and I can actually go in here and customize the mapping of the file to Studio. So in FileMaker, as you know, we've got different field types like text and number, and then on the Studio side, we've got some more advanced field types. So as one example here, we have email address. In FileMaker, that would just be a text file, but in Studio, I can actually map that to be an email, which gives us benefit of doing things like making sure that the entered email address or the entered text is a valid email address. I'll go through and make a couple of quick changes here. So we'll make our category a drop down. The description, instead of being short text, we'll make that long text. And then urgency, let's also make you a drop down. And phone number, we'll make a phone number. So if you've done imports in FileMaker or even in Studio, this should feel pretty familiar to you as a process. With that change, I can go ahead and hit save. And now what's happening is we're taking and replicating that FileMaker table inside of Studio. So we are copying over the schema and all 10,000 of those records and now creating a linked table in Studio to your FileMaker data. So if I drill in here, we can see that I do in fact have those almost 10,000 records in Studio. I go back up here to the top and we'll open up FileMaker again. And let's show all of these records. So we can see here that we have the same set of data between both. Okay, so now that I've got this data here, let's go start doing some fun Studio stuff with it. I'll
Actually,
add a...
before you
Oh,
do that, we have a
sure.
question.
Yeah, go for it.
So once you've turned on this mapping,
Mhm.
is there a way to disable it so that it no longer shows up?
Absolutely. So if you come in here and if I had multiple tables within this data source being synced, you'd see a list here. In this case, I've only got the one, and I can go in here and select remove. And what that will do is actually make it a standard Studio table. So it'll show up here in your list of Claris Studio tables. So if you wanted to, I've heard feedback on, I just want to, sort of get my table into Studio. So I've got all the fields and I've got all the data, but I don't actually want it to be linked in FileMaker at that point. Maybe you're going to use connect as the thing that data bridges or moves the data back and forth. Which you could do is do this initial sync, do the remove, and then it would just be a table that you'd have access to.
Okay, and then a couple more questions. Once you've done that, can you also then remove that table? After you've removed the link, can you then remove the table entirely so that
Yep.
it doesn't show up?
Yep. Yep.
Oh.
So once it's removed, it's a Claris Studio table, and then you can remove it just like you would any other Studio table.
Actually, now we got clarification. Can you meant to disable a few fields from the data source? So not bring in all the data fields.
Not yet, but that is our intent. So if I go back over to the managed data source, you'll see that we have this option to sync. Right now, you don't have the option to disable it. That's something we're going to do in a update coming here shortly. Right now, it's going to bring over all the tables. I'm sorry, all of the fields within the table. But we do want to give you the option that if you wanted to restrict that to just a handful of fields, that you would be able to.
All right.
Cool. Okay, so we've got our data here. Let's go ahead and we'll create just a basic form. Request. And let's just call this works. Okay, so now we've got our form. We have now access to all the fields that came from FileMaker, so you can come in here obviously and remove ones that you don't want, reorganize these. I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time making this look nice, but let's just move the customer name up to the top and move this window out of the way. Let's go ahead and share this. Open up a new window. Okay, so here is our form. Let's open up FileMaker next to it. You can see our record count here. Let's add a record for myself. Hit submit. And I don't know if you saw that, but effectively immediately that new record showed up in our list. So if we scroll down to the very bottom here, you can see my new record has come in called Robert. I saw there was a question here asking how quick the data import is. So I'll tell you, in that case, we did 10,000 records in under, God, that was probably about 10, 15 seconds. I've done our max for this table, which is 250,000 records. That took me about 3 minutes to bring everything in. We do know that right now, if you've got container data in the table, it does take longer. That's something that we're working on. But in cases where you're, at our limit of 250,000 records, if it doesn't store container data, again, I'm seeing it about 3 to 4 minutes. I actually want to submit one additional record here. I forgot. I wanted to show it up later on in our demo. So let's do a little bit more information. Let's do my Apple email. And I'll say that this is plumbing. And our description is this. Okay, that's enough information. We'll show that up later. You can see again that record has come in almost immediately. Rosemary, I saw a bunch of questions coming
There's
in.
a
Is there
bunch of
anything?
questions
Yeah.
coming in. So I'm just to categorize them, and I think we're gonna talk about this later when we talk about use cases, but there are a couple questions just, whoa, take a step back. I don't understand why I would want Claris Studio if I don't have Claris FileMaker, or if I'm already happy with Claris FileMaker. So let's
Okay.
table that. And then another question is, can you choose not to pull FileMaker data? What if you only want to push into FileMaker from a Claris Studio form?
You could do that as well. Probably the best way to do it in the way that I've been leveraging, or when I build solutions like that, is actually use Connect and use Connect flows so that the data is basically going into a standard Claris Studio table, and then when a record is created in that table, run a Connect flow that pushes the data into the FileMaker table of your choice. That gives you an opportunity to do any pre-processing. So sometimes you may have a complex form where you've got lots of different questions that you're asking, but maybe you don't want that to be represented as individual fields in FileMaker. So maybe you ask a bunch of questions and then use Connect to combine those in some way, and then submit that as a single field into FileMaker. We actually, if you go to our engineering blogs on our website, there's actually a step-by-step guide on exactly how to build something like that using Connect.
Yes. And just a couple questions about FileMaker server. So first one is, does the FileMaker server need to be hosted in Claris's FileMaker cloud environment, or can the server be anywhere?
So the server can be anywhere, but of course we're talking to an external service in Studio, so it needs to have access to the outside world. So you'd have to have appropriate ports opened, or if you hosted it, we see people host it in things like AWS. So not specifically our cloud environment, but it does need to be, Studio needs a way to communicate with it. At the moment, we haven't updated FileMaker 2025 Cloud just yet, so we don't support cloud as a data source. If I go back here and manage our data sources and look at the provider. So you'll see here that only on-prem server and specifically 2025 server is supported. But later in the summer when we release cloud, the same behavior would work with our FileMaker Cloud product as well.
All right, and then I think finally, before you move on, what happens in a scenario where your FileMaker server is shut down or for some other reason is no longer available?
Because this is a file or a replicated table, meaning the table exists in Studio and then we're doing a sync back and forth to server. If server was unavailable for some period of time, those submissions would still come in. Now, when the server is back up, you will need to do a little bit of work to go and grab those records that have come in since the server has been down. Maybe using again something like Connect to push the records that had come in while server was down to make sure that you update the data that was stored inside of FileMaker. But part of the reason we did it this way is to ensure that, since this is often customer facing, if for some reason server, you needed to do a run maintenance or something happens and brings the server down, that your clients are still able to go in and submit data, interact with it. Again, all because it's hosted in Claris Studio still.
Yep.
Yeah. Also, it's gonna if the same server comes up and everything's still there, and they can resync again. I believe it will resync again once it sees that the server's up.
Right.
So So eventually, once both, or if like the internet connection goes down or something like that, it does save up changes and will resync when it has the opportunity to do so.
All right, and I'm just seeing a lot of feedback that people are lost. So I think, Robert, we should take a step back and talk a little bit about what Claris Studio is. And will you prepare for that? I just wanted to also share out the poll results. It looks like, to the answer to the question, have you used Claris Studio? Half the audience answered no. And then about 15% have something in production, 15% are testing, and 20% are considering for a project. And are you more likely to use Claris Studio now that you can access FileMaker data? 85% said yes. So I think that's it. And then, so going the other way, have you added Claris Studio tables to your FileMaker solution? Of the, let's see, so a little over half who are using Studio, half of the people said no. 30% said I'm not using Studio, and 15% said yes.
Got it. Okay.
So,
Thank you for that. Taking a step back, and I don't know, Rosemary, maybe we can share resources after the fact, because I think we've got some good videos and things like that on the website that'll help. But think of Claris Studio as an extension of your FileMaker toolset, right? You've got a FileMaker solution. You have cases where you need to reach out to external users. In the portion of the demo we just saw, that was collecting data from external users. Maybe today you're using things like chat forms or other form technology to gather that data, and then using integrations to go and get that data and bring it into FileMaker, which is additional, one, potentially cost of those third-party products that you're using, but then also just the overhead of the integration between that product and FileMaker, where Studio is meant to give you something that's all-inclusive in the Claris ecosystem. And as you saw from that data source integration that we just did to a FileMaker data source, much less overhead as far as integration. So the hope is that your FileMaker solution can then easily be extended to the web. The portion of the demo I'm about to show you, though, is also going where a person can reach in an external user, so an external person, not part of your team, like a customer, could come in and see information. So in this example, we've got a solution that's used for collecting job requests. But part of that is also a person that has submitted a job request being able to come in and see the status of the request or leave feedback. And if you were doing that in market today, you would either be going down the path of using something like custom web development, custom web publishing, so that you're effectively building a front end yourself using the data API to communicate with FileMaker's backend, or you're using a third-party product to do that sort of front end development, and then going through the integration complexities.
yeah.
Or in some cases using WebDirect, but obviously that doesn't give you the sort of modern web design experience, and also is limited by things like its licensing and scaling. Sorry, Rosemary, go ahead.
Yeah, I was about to ask you, like, there's a question in a nutshell, why would you use FileMaker with Claris Studio instead of just FileMaker and WebDirect for that outward-facing forms?
It's all about use case and needs. I mean, if you're using WebDirect and you're successful, awesome. It's all about the platform having the tool set that you need to be successful. However, we have lots of use cases where, hey, we've got a registration that's going up and we're going to have thousands of external users submitting data over the course of the weekend. We need to make sure that we've got a service that can stand up to that, that works well across whether they're coming in through an iPhone or on the desktop. And that's something that WebDirect just wasn't built for. WebDirect is really FileMaker in a web browser and has lots of great utility there. But when you have something where you've got to integrate this in a way that external users are able to come in large volumes and submit data, that's where something like Studio can be more effective.
Right. And then next question, and I think this is where you're going in the demo. Can you share a specific record to a client, for example. So that, for example, like a ticketing system.
Mm-hmm.
So
Perfect setup. I didn't plant that question, I promise, but we'll go ahead and see that in the demo now. So we just did a form, which is one of the many types that view types that Studio provides. We're going to now choose custom, which was something that we released a couple of months ago. Custom gives you the ability to really create a truly custom interface, similar to what you might do in FileMaker's layout mode. So let's call this customer portal. We'll add this to the same PeakWorks hub. Go ahead and hit create. Now, when we create the view, currently by default, we give you something that looks familiar. It's the status toolbar, similar to what you've seen in FileMaker for years. In this particular case, though, this is going to be something an external customer is going to come in. They're going to be seeing, one or many of their work requests that they've submitted. So we want to actually remove this and use a different view type. I'm sorry, a different object type called a list control. I'm sorry, a card list. So a card list is, I would say, probably closest to a portal in FileMaker. It's not that it has to necessarily show related data, but similar to how in portals you can do the same sort of found set in FileMaker, so you can point that to a table and use that to navigate records. So I just drag that object on, and I'm going to add a few fields here. Actually, let's configure this first. So we've got this card list. We'll give it a title called My Requests. And let's see. You can choose up to 3 fields to represent it. So let's do status, description, and let's see, category. Okay, so there's our card list. Let's make it so that it also goes the max size of the screen. And then let's drag out a few fields. So we'll call it, let's see, say urgency, description of the problem. What else is good? Maybe we want to see who it's assigned to, so we'll drag that out as well. Again, we could spend way more time. We can also add a breakup line here, making this look nice, but I think that's enough for now. So let's preview that, see what that looks like. So now you can see we've got all 10,000 of our records here currently. And as I select through these, we can see that it is updating the information. So this is just the very beginnings of going back to that question of, can I share this specific records or something like that with end users? Before we get there, though, I do want to make one other change to this, because we want people to be able to come in and maybe give us a rating on how well the work request was completed. So we'll go in and add a new field, and we'll call this, or just use the rating field. Why I wanted to do that, though, is to showcase that not only are we taking the FileMaker data and the schema and syncing that over to Studio, but this is working the other way as well. So if I go back into FileMaker now, we'll see that if I go in and look at the fields that I now have available to me, I will also now have this rating field. So I can go ahead and add that to the list, and we'll come back to taking a look at that later. So we actually just made schema changes in Studio and had that reflect on the FileMaker side. Now that does mean that you need to have admin access for the account that you're granting access to Studio. So especially when you're doing your initial setup, that would be the best way to do it. But I did want you to call out that as you're doing development, the idea is that this feels like one cohesive experience. Okay, so the last piece we'll want to do, if I come back over here and go into the hub, let's go ahead and invite folks. So I have a group set up called clients, and we are going to use a feature called configured data filters. And so what this will do is, for the jobs table, we're going to match based off of the email address field. So for the email address field that exists in the record in FileMaker, that is now available in Studio as well, which is right here. When the person logs in, we're gonna look at their email address and then filter the record set to just those records. So only those records will ever be sent to the client. And then of course you can use filtering and all of our sorting capabilities in Studio on the front end to do further refinement to show them specific records of your choosing. But this would limit them to just their records. So we'll go ahead and hit apply and update. And then I'm gonna actually copy this URL and open up a new browser window so I can sign in as this end user. So here we've got, we're using Cognito as our external identity provider. So it's given us some custom login information or login UI. Log in with my client's email address. Now, in this case, I'm having them go to the hub, but you can actually link them directly to the specific record. I'm sorry, to the specific view here. But in this case, I just wanted to do it quick so that I could see that now I am looking at just the records that are assigned to this client, including that one that we set up earlier. So if you remember when we did the data request, I'm sorry, the work request, we submitted this particular record. That shows up here automatically for me, and then I can go in here and do the star rating, which will then show up in my FileMaker solution. You can see here, this is a star rating in Studio, but FileMaker represents it as a number field. So we've got our value of 5. Cool. So we took some questions in there. We did some pausing, but we had this built, no magic. I showed you the full end-to-end in, I don't know, probably 15 or so minutes. So when we talk about the value of where Studio brings this, if you were trying to do something like this with custom web publishing as an example, this would be a considerable amount of not just time, but expertise that would go into needing, understanding web development to be able to create something similar to this. So that was the demo. I'll have this, I'll stop sharing for a moment, but if there are questions that I can reference back to, I'll bring it back up. But I guess I'll pause there, Rosemary, if there's any specific questions we want to dive into.
Just checking the questions. Yeah, so I think the biggest questions are around how do you set up that authentication piece. So so one question is, do those external users also need a password? So what does that experience look like?
So in the users management area of Studio, there's a button for configuring external identity providers. Excuse me. And then for protocol, we support OIDC and SAML. So you'll do that configuration here. And then leverage, again, in our case, we were using Cognito. So we had accounts created in the Cognito side for those users. And then when they sign in through Studio, we have them automatically defaulting to our clients group. So in this case, anyone that signs in with that Cognito account that you've created for them will automatically get added to the clients list. You could use Claris IDs, but we're imagining that in most cases, representing a business, you don't want them logging into Claris or Claris Studio. You want them logging into your business. And so the primary method that we expect folks to use is through configuring external identity provider. We do have help on setting all of this up. And actually, I forgot to mention this earlier. With this release last week, we've also introduced some onboarding tours. So if you come into this for the first time, you'll see that there's a new tour that kind of walks you through getting started. But for the data sources specifically, we've added the section of topics that you can come in and re-enter. So if I went through things quickly on setting up the data sources, when you log into Studio now, in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see the FileMaker add data source, and then a tour that walks you through, here's all the things that you need to make sure are configured, and then a step-by-step on getting that connected to one of your FileMaker sources.
And then I think to keep things moving. Well, first, I just want to let everyone know that Robert and Clay will be joining Richard Carlton later today at 1 o'clock Pacific time, 4 o'clock Eastern time in the US. And I recognize for those of you in Europe, that's pretty late. For an extended Q&A, and what I'll do is we will share a summary of all the questions that we didn't get to with Richard and his team so that they have those questions queued up, ready to ask later today. But to make sure that we at least cover the topics we intended to cover today, I'm going to ask a question that I saw, because I think this is specifically what Clay is here to talk about. So in FileMaker 2025, how do you make that connection to Claris Studio? Like what's new? What's different that's enabling that connection?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, no. So yeah, Studio is now using OData to talk to the FileMaker server. Connect is actually using that too. So one of the things here, let me bring up my slide, and I guess I'll just go talk about all that stuff now. So what we've done for FileMaker 2025 is that we've been really updating the amount of support that we have in OData. And the previous years, we added the OData 4.01 support to it, so it's all compliant to that. We're adding more aggregate support, so the OData extensions for data aggregation, so you'll have access to a lot more aggregates like sum, min, max, average, count, distinct, and such. Containers, the OData container support was pretty basic before, but now in this version, you get the name of the file that was imported. You can, when you import or when you push a file into OData, you can set what the file name is. You can get the file name back. There's also valueless supports in the schema information you get from OData. You'll see what valueless are there, and if the valueless aren't relational, you can get the contents of them. And I think I saw that question going by in the chat thing, is that there is some other things that we've added to OData that's being used by Studio right now, but they're not really fully baked. We're using Studio to basically test this out. So we may be changing how the APIs work and that stuff. So that's why we haven't published it yet. But one of the big things that Studio is using is using OData supports webhooks for getting notifications from FileMaker. So when you change a record in FileMaker, Studio registers with that server saying, send me a note whenever anything changes in this table. And he can actually ask, and only filter. I'm only interested about records about with this specific filter or the specific columns that you're worried about. And the OData support in FileMaker is really the way we're moving for all future external access to FileMaker. We're going to eventually change the current ODBC driver and JDBC driver that talks to FileMaker to use the OData APIs instead of a custom API that it currently uses. This is one of the reasons why we added all the new aggregate support. And we needed better container support because XDBC stuff had better container support than OData previously. And we're envisioning that we're going to encourage people to move off the FileMaker Data API onto OData. Much like the XML API is still in FileMaker, you can still use the old XML APIs. We did get rid of the PHP layer, but the XML API still works if you're still using it. And that'll be true with the FileMaker Data API. It's not going to be going away. It's just that we're not going to be spending many resources on making additions to it or improving it. We have other things that we want to do with the OData. So basically, that's where our concentration is doing all that, is getting that improve its performance. Much like you have secondary servers now for WebDirect, OData will be able to be spread across secondary servers. And there's a lot of work going on and stuff that's going to be coming in the future for that. I know, and with OData, with the filtering and stuff like that, I don't think this is in the current Studio support, but people were saying that if I don't want to see all the records in Studio, I just want to see a subset. But I believe it is in their plans to be able, when you configure which columns you want to see, you'll actually be able to set a filter for which subset of the data you want to see. So I saw some questions coming about saying, well, I just want people to be able to add records from Studio. You'd be able to say a filter saying, well, okay, I don't want anything that's on the FileMaker server already, but I just want to push things down. You'd be able to do that. So like Robert said, using connect and flow, if you are just pushing one way, that may be the best way to do it. But like in FileMaker, there's usually like 2 or 3 different ways to do everything. So really, I'm just pushing that. If you're interested about what's our future for doing APIs like this, and as you see, we're basically doing a sync solution too. So maybe we will finally get into the sync. We're using Studio a lot to push things of what we want to do in the future and stuff like that. And Studio, with how fast it can change and update and add features, things will be coming a lot quicker on that side.
So
yeah,
from Hansa about OData. Can I assume OData stability and performance issues are now going to be considered high priority as a result of the tight integration between FileMaker and Studio?
It's getting pounded a lot harder now with Studio. So yes, we're looking at that.
Yeah, and I think this one's for Richard. So now going forward, if I add a Studio table, like regular Studio table to FileMaker as an external data source, does that now utilize the OData connection as well?
Not yet. We're gonna that is a plan to move to a place where we're able to, like we did in the example today, move the FileMaker table to Studio, do it in the opposite direction as well, and use all the same sync capabilities. We're not there yet, but that's the direction that we're going.
Yeah, I guess I should also mention in the prior to this release of FileMaker, you could add a table in the join graph in FileMaker, and that table could be from Studio. That's going to be deprecated. Actually, I'm not sure if you can even create a new one right now, but the current ones will be working. But we're going to be moving to this new scheme that Robert mentioned, is that now you'll have a different mechanism of syncing with Studio. You'll say, oh, I want this table over in Studio, and then it will go into the syncing mechanism instead of using the ESS style communications, which isn't the most performant. And if the connection goes down, you don't have access on one side or the other. So how Studio is talking to FileMaker is going to be the future for how FileMaker talks to Studio also. They'll be bidirectional.
All right. I'm just like skimming back through questions. So I think at this point it might be good to talk about a little bit more about licensing, because there were a lot of questions about, what's the difference in licensing between using WebDirect or using Claris Studio.
Yeah. Why don't I talk through that? So I'm on claris.com, so you can come here and view for yourself how the breakdowns look. Let's start here. The 2 tiers that we have now is Starter and Max. Sorry. And what we've added now is Studio is part of your licensing. So if you're licensed FileMaker 2025 user, you'll have access to, or customer, you'll have access to both Connect and Studio. As part of your standard license here, your starter license rather, you'll get 10 native web published views for consumption. So we don't count the external number of users that you have in something like the client portal example that I showed. It's just about whether those views, or how many views I should say, you're sharing. So if I go back to Studio for a moment, if you go into your user section, you'll actually see at the top how many users, or I'm sorry, how many views you've currently shared and how many you have remaining. In this case, we've got 9. And the reason for that, if I go back to my hub, is we've got 1 publicly shared view in that form. At the moment, this custom view is only shared to 1 user in this hub. If I had more than 3 users in this hub, then if I had this customer portal view here, that would then count as 2 views that you're licensed for. So it really looks at whether you've got a publicly shared link or if you've got a view inside of a hub that has more than 3 users. And then that'll, again, reflect here in your user list. Where's my page? If you bump up to the max tier, and this is 45 per user per month, then you get unlimited native web views published for consumption. So it's really just in that starter point where you're monitoring those 10 views. The Connect side, I know we didn't really talk too much about Connect, but if you're not aware, we've made changes to Connect so that we only count active flows when they are interacting with third party, which is really important because any flows that you've run that are just moving data or manipulating data within FileMaker or between FileMaker and Studio, within Studio, all of that is just part of your package. You don't pay any extra for that. And it's only connections that you're integrating with third parties that they count as an active flow. And again, for the starter tier, you start with 5, and then for the max, you get up to 50. There's information here on how you get provisioned for Studio. So I know you can access it through the admin console, and this will require you to take some action on your part to get provisioned. But by virtue of the fact that you're a licensed FileMaker 25 customer, you do have access to that now.
Yeah, and can you clarify which license types have access to Claris Studio and Claris Connect?
So any active subscriptions and perpetual that has active maintenance. We're not supporting yet things like SBA or concurrency licensing. If that's something that you're interested in, please talk to your sales representative. But we're starting here with the most common ways people are currently active users, whether that's an active subscription or an active maintenance program.
Yes, and I will also add that it does not yet include the FileMaker developer subscription as well. So I am checking questions. There's another question about pricing for Macs for on-premise. You were showing the cloud page.
Let's see. I think that should be updated. Actually, I think our website might be flipped. Hold on. So that should be for the active. Hang on, let me share my screen again. So the tiers are the same breakdowns. Starter is for server. Sorry, I didn't realize that I was looking at the wrong tab earlier. So thanks for that call out, Rosemary. And then for Max, contact sales, but it's the same breakdown as far as the number of active users. Active views and flows. And again, this is just on Claris.com, our pricing page.
Yeah. So at this point, can you go back to FileMaker server? I just wanted to be clear. Yeah, Max is not publicly priced, but you can reach out to sales
to your sales
for that information because it's going to be specific to how many users you have and all kinds of other things. And I'll just also add that through the beginning of September, all customers have access to the Max tier, correct?
Correct.
And then what about site license? What's included in a Claris site license?
It's the same breakdown. Again, you have to talk to sales as far as exact pricing. I believe if it's a site license, it would end up being effectively the max. So it would be the unlimited native views and 50 active flows, I believe.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Another question that I think has come up a few times. Right now, Claris Studio is only available through our cloud as a software as a service.
Mhm.
Will there be an on-premise version of Claris Studio?
So it's not our focus at the moment. We get that question quite a bit, given its nature and the space it occupies as far as being a external facing user interface for both gathering information and exposing FileMaker data. In most cases, that's going to be something that needs to be in the web. But we've heard that request, technically feasible, just not something that we're focused on right this moment.
Okay. And I don't know, Robert, if you're prepared to answer this. So to test this, you have to have a complete, like a full FileMaker license subscription, and you can't test with the developer subscription. Is there a reason why for that?
Just where we're starting focus wise. We have heard some requests for the developer license. That's something that's not off the table, but just as a first rollout for this, we're being available to the up the middle use case, which is our subscription license and our active maintenance license. That's where we started. So it will expand from there as it makes sense, but it's just a matter of focus.
Okay, thank you. Next, so just clarify one more time. If someone already has FileMaker Server, then
Mhm.
Claris Studio is included in their licensing.
If they have an active license for FileMaker 2025, then yes, it's part of your licensing. If you're, again, active subscription or maintenance or perpetual with maintenance, then you'll have access to be provisioned. We mentioned this briefly earlier, but just to reiterate, the connection, the data source, requires that you do have FileMaker Server 2025 installed. As Clay described, that we are leveraging some enhancements to the platform that enables that connection. So I imagine that for many people, that's going to be you've got your active license. You probably haven't upgraded your full system yet to the latest version. So in a test environment, you're running FileMaker 25 server and then doing some testing with Studio there.
So just a question, and I think I can take this one from a partner. So partners who have the standard partner licensing, questions, can they sign up for Claris Studio and Claris Connect through the console? And I believe you've already been provisioned a linked Claris Studio and Claris Connect access. So for that, please reach out to the partner team at partners@claris.com, and they'll help make sure that you're properly provisioned. And so also for any FDS subscribers who are actively working with customers, Claris Studio and Claris Connect are included with the licensing available to Claris partners. So again, maybe think about joining the partner community and becoming an active Claris partner. And you can learn more about becoming a partner on the Claris website.
I saw a question here, Rosemary, that I want to hit about can I build a solution with Studio that has a login area for external partners that do not require a full person license? And the answer to that is yes. The external users, so in that client portal example that I showed, those external users that are coming through the external identity provider wouldn't count towards your team license. So, when you license the Claris platform, you're licensing the people that are on your team. If you've got 10 people in your team, you get a 10-person license. But those folks that are not someone that is a team member, they're, a parent that's coming in and looking at the registration for their student, or a client for that work request solution that we just saw. Those folks could log in through that external system or that external identity provider and get access and not require a full team license the way that you would a person that's actually in your team using the platform every day.
Yes. And also I just want to add, again, reiterate that that's one of the fundamental differences between Claris Studio and FileMaker WebDirect. For FileMaker WebDirect, those people accessing WebDirect need to be members of your team. They need to have a full FileMaker license, and that is not a requirement for those authenticated views in Claris Studio. I think this is a good question. And are shortened URLs for shared forms available?
Not something that we have built in just yet. We have seen that request. It's something that we're considering right now. I know people are using things like tinyurl. Studio forms also provide the ability to pass parameters, so you can do pre-filled forms. So especially in those cases, we're seeing folks do it. It's something that we absolutely have looked in, just not something that we've done just yet. The questions around, I saw a couple questions around SBA. I just want to call out there that, again, it's been a matter of focus, especially for SBA, where you're bundling a solution and deploying it, which means you got elements of FileMaker Studio and even potentially Connect. There's some work that we've got to do to make that a good experience, so you can actually bundle this whole thing up, copy it, and replicate it, which we don't have just yet. And so that's why we don't have options for SBA. We are doing some early tests for certain SBA solutions, but we've got some work there to make sure that that's a good, high-quality experience.
Also, a question about syncing images between FileMaker and Studio. This came up a couple of times. You mentioned at the start that there were a few issues with that. And someone said, I just tried to add our FileMaker 2025 server to Studio, and it is showing issues with some of the container fields. So can you go into a little more depth on what those issues might be and how to troubleshoot?
So specifically, the issue I was calling out earlier was the time it takes to do the initial sync is longer with container data. Again, that's something that we're working on. If you're having issues with specific, if I understood that correctly, some records, the container data is not coming over, it might be maybe file limit size. I am unfortunately blanking on what Studio's limits are currently. I don't know, Clay, if you happen to remember, but that might be it. So I would look at see if there's any, from a troubleshooting standpoint, looking at if there's any pattern in file sizes for the ones that aren't showing up.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, Studio changes so fast, it's hard for me to keep up with what the current limitations are on it and stuff like that. So the OData doesn't have a limit on it, so they'll probably be fixed pretty soon in the Studio side as they get more container. Now we're talking about this new OData side of things, not the old style connection from FileMaker to Studio.
But yeah, if you're having issue, definitely reach out to us. And as Clay said, we're making improvements quickly to address issues as they come up.
All right, and we have about 5 minutes left. So I just want to first ask everyone to please take our closing questions and let us know what you thought of this session and what your plans are as to deploying both FileMaker 2025 and Claris Studio into production. And then a couple more questions. So I think, is it possible to add show or hide logic on fields on Studio forms in a view? So for example, if a user answers yes to a question, then show something.
Yep. Yeah, so there's 2 layers to that. There's the ability to show or hide a specific field. So, you have them select something in a drop down, and depending on that value in the drop down, it maybe shows an extra field. You can also, though, do it so that it routes you to different pages. So depending on a drop down, you might show a whole different page to some user with a whole set of fields. Again, I'll point to the Engage blog. The engineering blogs that we have. We've got 2 up currently, with a couple more coming that starts taking advantage of the new stuff we just released. But in those blogs, we walk through creating a pretty robust form that do things like show and hide objects, show and hide pages, create summary pages so that you can see, what data they submitted so they can validate before they hit commit. And then how all of that works with a connect flow that takes some data, processes it, and then ultimately brings it into your FileMaker solution. I believe my video from Engage this past year is up, where I go into some detail about those types of solutions, and you can kind of think of those engineering blogs. And my session at Engage this year is kind of going together. So you can get from me sort of the high level of how these things work, and then a really detailed step-by-step guide in the engineering blog.
Yeah, and I don't know if we have those engineering blogs handy, but the easiest way to find them is go to Claris Community. They're right on the front page. And the two engineering blogs Robert just talked about are the first two links on that page. And I think we have time for maybe one more question. And I think this was way back at the beginning. There was a question about how the syncing between Claris Studio and Claris FileMaker handles data collisions. So if an internal user and the external user are both editing a record at the same time.
So right now, FileMaker is the source of truth and will always win. That's something that in the future we might look at giving you guys more control over, but at the moment, FileMaker is the source of truth and is always the winner.
Okay. And again, I guess that was a quick answer. Question, and this is a design limit question. So one of the design limits of FileMaker is that field height is not dynamic, depending on content.
Mm.
Does Studio support dynamic field heights?
Probably not in the way that you'd want just yet, but that's something that tweaks in Studio are much easier for us to do than FileMaker. So something we could look at, but at the moment, no.
I guess I saw one question here that for logged in users, must we have external ID providers? Cannot authenticate with FM. So the authentication in Studio is pretty much completely independent of what's going on inside FileMaker. So everything you're doing on the Studio side, you have your own external authentication, or you're using the Studio IDs and stuff like that. You can't use the FileMaker local accounts or anything like that, or whatever's configured inside FileMaker. The OData login is basically, you kind of think of it as an API token, is what Studio is using to talk to FileMaker. It's there's one pipe that's between the two, but you're managing the security from the Studio side, showing what columns you want to see, what records you want to see. That's all being controlled from the Studio side of work. So it's really two completely independent systems, which means you can, there's a lot more flexibility of what you want to show to your anonymous users, or your users coming in with whatever accounts they want and stuff like that.
All right, I'm trying to see, is there anything else? I think not, but just to wrap up, again, please join the Richard Carlton live stream this afternoon to see Robert and Clay and get more in-depth answers to the questions we didn't have time for. And please join us tomorrow at the same time for Community Live, where my guests will be Rick Coleman from Claris and Vince Minano from Beeswax, to talk about everything else that's new in FileMaker 2025 that isn't AI, basically. Isn't AI and isn't sharing data with a full platform. So we should have fun for that. And also, please join us on July 24th for a special late in the day Pacific time, early Friday morning in Australia, New Zealand, and Japan for an extended Q&A with all of the Claris team. We do recognize that this time is really difficult for people around on the other side of the world, so we added a special session for you on July 24th or July 25th in that APAC time zone. So thank you very much. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Clay. And we hope to see you tomorrow. Bye.
Thanks all.